did it yesterday down in New York today, so you know what to do and how to do it, and you know how to use
What time are you doing the memorial?
these insertion rods, we call them. And when you plug that in, and the flag goes in just so far, the pole will go in so far, but the flag does not touch the ground. Okay? And I'm going to be giving you two sections. If you look over there, over here, you can see the flagpole. See the flagpole? Yep. Well, okay, this is, if you look at my map here, look at this right here. That's my phone, it's speaking. This is flagpole. I'm going to give you section 29 and 26 over there. Okay, and there's 8, 14, 26, and 27 is, there's the 53 flags. Take 6 bundles. Okay, and that'll give you enough flags to put in those sections. You know where you're going?
Who's your troll this week?
Hello?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm just trying to control.
Yeah, no worries. It's not like we have anywhere to go.
So now, they know what to do, so say hi to Martha. You're going to say, we're putting flags out.
We're putting flags out.
Good for you.
Did you really?
Okay.
I will yes. Thank you. Thank you again for the service. It looks like it's going to clear out. Joey.
All the way down to this foot right here. You push it into ground that far, and that leaves enough space for the grass to fly, for the flag to fly.
Yep.
And the flag cannot touch the ground.
Got you.
So it's got to be straight down.
All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
So now we're going to find a place, a home for you. Okay. That's good. Flag's not touching.
Let's start left to right.
Okay.
Some of them are not going to all look like that. Some of them are going to be vertical up at it.
We might have two more here.
What are you doing?
Michael, put on your butt. In your pocket. So you're going to stay with him?
Me neither.
You won the Sam. We'll go with you guys. Sam's coming with us.
Yeah, we're gonna get him.
Which vehicle are we using? We're gonna go with Sam, okay?
Oh, okay. Which vehicle we're gonna use? Yours?
You can use mine if you want.
All right. Well, 4 of us won't fit in mine. I got all the flowers.
Yep. All right. Andrami. Where is he? Yeah, I'm gonna stay here. He's doing his hand favor. Where's your mask? Where's your mask? You need all of those.
Mike?
Yeah.
Would you show these good people here and get an insertion to them? Take them down to a locker, show them how.
His guidance is the center, so no big deal. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's tough.
For a while.
Yeah, because there's
There's like four of us.
this Revolutionary War up there, there's World War I, there's all kinds of stuff. And I know that Chet Sidlitz used to love to do it, but he'd get up there and we'd be all done, packed up, ready to go, and he's still walking around because he'd look at the monuments and he'd say, well, I know that one's Nice. And then, oh yeah, you can't.
Get it committed. Just look to it, put it in.
Hey, are you enjoying vacation?
Well, listen, I'm on vacation now. Never mind the
I want to give you some good news though. Edwin told Janessa.
Scary thing, some of these people you know.
I know.
I know, isn't it? Stanley Southbridge, Richard Jakes. Yeah.
It's okay.
Sneesh. Sneesh.
If you touch it,
Justice Adams and those Neskies.
Oh yeah.
Has Michael been noticing that we've had two women veterans? There was one there. Take you back to see the other one there with your great-great-grandfather with the Bronze Star and the... It's a cool one to do.
Who's that?
LePage, it was once, yeah. I think you were responsible for part of Roy. Angio,
Where does it say LePage?
POW, Bronze Star,
Where does it say LePage?
Combat Infantry. We'll get to that one later.
This one.
Skip. We've never done this one before. We've done every cemetery but this one.
It's very interesting.
It is cool, especially the people that you know.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear me okay? No? Better? All right. Thank you. All right. So first of all, good morning and thank you for attending the ceremony. Unfortunately, because of the COVID virus, we couldn't do the parade this year. And the plans were all set in motion, but unfortunately, we can't do it for today. But we did decide, like many towns, to do a ceremony. This past weekend, starting Friday, flags were laid across all of our cemeteries throughout the town. Wreaths were laid throughout the monuments throughout town. And I want to thank all the volunteers that came out all those days, even in the heat, to place the flags on the graves of our fallen veterans. I want to thank Kathy Grenier. If you notice around town, you'll be able to see brand new wreaths. She did those in about 3 or 4 days and knocked it out at the park, and we really appreciate your time and effort volunteering yourself to do this for us. Thank you. So I'm just going to give you a little history of Memorial Day, and then we will start the ceremony. 3 years after the Civil War ended on May 5th, 1868, the head of an organization of the Union Veterans, the Grand Army of the Republic, or the GAR, established Decorations Day as a time for the nation to decorate graves of the war dead with flowers. Major General John A. Logan declared that Decoration Day should be observed on May 30th. It was not until after World War I, however, it was not until after World War I that it was expanded to all wars that we fought on behalf of our nation. In 1971, Memorial Day was declared a national holiday by an act of Congress, and it was then also placed on the last Monday of every May. A quote that perfectly fits here. The Athenian leader Pericles offered a tribute to the fallen heroes of the Peloponnesian War over 24 centuries ago that could be applied today to the 1.1 million Americans who have died in our nation's wars. He quotes, I quote, "Not only are they commemorated by columns and inscriptions, but there dwells also an unwritten memorial of them, graven not on stone, but in the hearts of men." So I'd like everybody to face the honor guard. We will play the national anthem, and then followed by the invocation. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Curt Litchfield up here. He's the chaplain for the VFW Post 6055, Leonide J. Lemire.
Gracious God, on this Memorial Day weekend, we remember and give thanks for those who have given their lives in the service of our country. When the need was the greatest, they stepped forward and did their duty to defend the freedoms that we enjoy and to win the same for others. O God, you yourself have taught us that there is no love that is greater than that which gives itself for another. These honored dead gave their most precious gift they had, life itself, for loved ones and neighbors, for comrades, for country, and for us. Help us to honor their memory by caring for the family members that they have left behind, by ensuring that their wounded comrades are properly cared for, by being watchful caretakers of the freedoms for which they gave their lives, and be demanding that no other young men and women follow them to a soldier's grave unless the reason is worthy and the cause is just. Holy One, help us to remember that freedom is not free. There are times when the cost is indeed dear. Let us never forget those who paid so terrible a price to ensure that freedom would be our legacy. Though their names may fade with the passing of generations, may we never forget what they have done. Help us to be worthy of their sacrifice. Amen.
Thank you, Curt. Next, we're going to have the laying of the wreath here at the honor roll. During Roman times, to honor the brave leaders, they would lay wreaths throughout the city, and today, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Trombley will do this by laying a wreath at our honor roll to commemorate those Southbridge residents who served in our armed forces and those who perished fighting in our nation's wars. like I said earlier, we're doing this ceremony and trying to keep it as brief as possible, especially before, hopefully, the rain does not come. But I want to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Roberts. He was born in Southbridge on 18 July 1975 and graduated from Bay Path Regional Vocational Technical High School in 1993. Upon graduating high school, he enlisted in the United States Army with an Airborne Ranger contract and shipped off to start his training. After graduating basic training and job training, Mr. Roberts entered Airborne School and later assigned to 1st Ranger Battalion. For the next 8 years, he held positions as a team leader, squad leader, and later became a Ranger instructor. During this period, he deployed multiple times, including in support of Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti. In 2001, Mr. Roberts was assigned as an active duty recruiter and stationed here in Massachusetts. And in 2005, he chose to transfer to the Massachusetts National Guard and continue to his recruiting profession as an active guard soldier, and until 2017, where he retired as a Sergeant First Class with over 24 years of active service. After his retirement, he was hired on as a career readiness counselor with the Citizen Soldier for Life program, and recently was hired on as our town's Veteran Service Officer and Regional Veterans Service Director. So Keith, come on up, please, say a few words, and we want to welcome you.
First, I would like to thank all the volunteers who came out the last 3 days and helped us with the placing of the flags in our cemeteries. On behalf of the town, the Veterans Council, and Department of Veterans Services, we thank you very much and appreciate the outpouring of patriotism by our citizens and our community. For your tomorrow, we gave our today. This is the epitaph written on the tombstone of a fallen American warrior. It's why it is important this Memorial Day to reflect upon the tomorrows left to us by thousands of brave and selfless men and women and service members who have paid the ultimate sacrifice fighting our nation's wars. Memorial Day is the one day each year set aside to remember those who Abraham Lincoln observed gave the last full measure of devotion. We're here today because of them. They fell in the jungles of the South Pacific and on the bloody beaches of Normandy, on the icy slopes of the Korean Peninsula and the rice paddies of Vietnam, on the mountains and in the caves of Afghanistan and the sands of Iraq. Their sacrifices have also bequeathed a military force of 2.2 million active and reserve service members, many of whom are our neighbors, equally adept at fighting an enemy overseas and a natural disaster at home. Since 9/11, servicemen and women members have deployed more than 5 million times to places such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, the Balkans, Guantanamo Bay, the Sinai, and other locations. Despite knowing the dangers and time away from the family and friends, every serviceman and woman in today's military has either enlisted or re-enlisted since 9/11. These are the kind of men and women who swell our ranks. From the earliest days in American history, when our nation's only armed forces was the militia, the Minutemen who volunteered to defend their newly formed communities, men and women have volunteered to keep our nation free. The United States Armed Forces has changed significantly since our militia days. It's now made up of over 2.2 million service members whom serve throughout all 50 states and all over the world, committed to fighting America's wars, protecting our homeland, and building global and domestic partnerships. Memorial Day has changed too. It began after the Civil War when citizens would decorate the graves of soldiers who have died in action. Many who have served in their state militias today, after 19 years of war in Iraq, Afghanistan, nearly 7,000 U.S. servicemen and women have been killed and another 53,000 wounded. It is important that we pause to reflect upon these sacrifices. We must remember the families they left behind and the losses suffered by friends, employers, neighbors, and their extended community. Their loss and the legacy of freedom they left behind allows us to enjoy days like today. The United States Armed Forces legacy reaches far beyond the battlefield. We are fortunate enough to serve you in the homeland and in our communities. We have saved lives, protected people and property, and helped restore cities, towns decimated by hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. There are many ways you can keep our fallen as well as our injured and ill veterans on your mind and heart throughout the year. If so inclined, there are many organizations that offer countless ways to give back to those who have endured the physical, physiological, and emotional wounds of war. It could be driving a veteran to a medical appointment, befriending a veteran who lives alone in a nursing facility, or reaching out to find ways you can help engage and be part of the effort to care for those who have served. Working together with friends, neighbors, veterans groups, and entire communities, we can ensure the sacrifices made by our nation's finest and bravest never goes unappreciated, and that their memories are never forgotten. This Memorial Day, as we spend time with family and friends, please reflect upon the legacy left to us by all the brave men and women of our nation's armed forces. By honoring our fallen warriors, we honor their legacy of ensuring democracy, freedom, equality, and lasting peace prevails. On behalf of a great nation, we salute them and pledge to never forget. Thank you for joining me today to honor all those who gave their today so we could have tomorrow. Thank you.
So the next individual I'd like to introduce pretty much doesn't need an introduction himself, but I will do that for the namesake of what he's done for our community and what he's done for our veterans here within town and the region itself. Our Grand Marshal for this year's parade we picked pretty early on, and we would like him to come up here and say a few words on behalf of our community. Thank you, Keith, for your brief words. Our Memorial Day Grand Marshal is Mr. Mike Trombley. So, Mr. Trombley, I want to read off a little bio of his. I know he had to try to keep it as short as possible, but it's pretty hard with his career path and what he has done for our community again. When I'm done with this, he will also be reading off the names of those Southbridge veterans who passed away this past year. And if you look over here onto the center, we've already laid 46 today. We had, unfortunately, 46 individuals who served our community and served our great nation. And so we have 46 poppies that have been laid here this morning. So a quick bio on Mr. Trombley. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1965. He also went to airborne school and assigned airborne at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. May 1967, he requested duty to go to Vietnam. He arrived in Vietnam in June of 1967, and he was assigned to the 173rd Airborne Brigade. He served in Vietnam for over a year and returned home in 1968. He was also in 1968 reassigned over to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and he was promoted to sergeant. He was discharged later on that year on November 21st, 1968, with an honorable discharge. He also served many, many years on the Veterans Council. He started serving in 1969 and still to this day, he is on the council. If you don't know his past, he was also the Veteran Service Officer of the town of Southbridge from 1992 to 2020, where he recently retired and is enjoying life with his wife now, working on the garden and the yard. So I want to welcome Mr. Trombley to say a few words. He will also be reading off all the names, and all those names will be rang by a bell afterwards. Thank you. There you go, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Whoa, thanks. Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, as well as the Veterans Council, for naming me Grand Marshal for today's event. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Chief Woodson and the Southbridge Police Department, as well as Fire Chief Paul Normandin and the Fire Department for taking their time to join us for this ceremony this morning. Also, a quick thanks to Rich Gaudette, who is putting in his time today and providing us with a sound system so that we were able to get up here and say a few words. As we're all facing this horrific pandemic for more than 60 days and are restricted by the state and federal government, as to our activities, we must carry on with caution. As this event may appear to be an abbreviation of a Memorial Day ceremony as usual for the town of Southbridge, the theory remains the same. Today we honor, we remember those who made this supreme sacrifice for this country, as well as those who have gone before us. Today is a day to remember. As those of us that served this country in military service, most especially those of us that served in combat, remember the items that were constantly driven into our brains during training, whether it been our service number, whether it been our social security number, whatever it was. We were constantly driven to remember certain items. And there's two items that always stood out. One is we never leave anyone behind. And number two is we always remember our fallen comrades. For it is with them that we're able to be standing here today. And unfortunately, they're not. So we never plan to do any forgetting of anyone. I would like to thank the Veterans Council for giving me the opportunity to read off the names of those who have passed since last Memorial Day. With the bell. Cody Donald C. Brogan Thomas A. Bundiff George. Blair Gerald J. Boniface Lawrence C. Brusso Raymond A. Tully William. Power Norman R. Saganowitz Chester S. Kadair Norman G. Menard Paul R. Ballard Lucian H. Huffman John C. Siegel John H. Ford Thomas J. Jr. Fredette Richard A. Ramian Eugene J. Rivera Juan Vargas. Becker John J. Sullivan Dennis J. Supernaut Donald D. Richard Jimmy L. Billis Spiro S. Jagier Roland G. Wallace John N. Capistran Morris J. LeBlanc Brian D. Lamoureux Wilford J. Borbo Andre J. Quato Donald E. R. Jolin Francis G. Bono Laurie A. Petro Lazarek. Beaupre Robert. LaCroix Ernest E. St. Pierre Raymond J. Gauthier Joseph E. Lofgren Carl N. Fournier Rainey L. Marino Raymond J. Arpin Edmund V. Livernois George A. Dumas Norman J. Damian James Z. Bouchard Euclid V. Checker Ernest P. Nesty. May they all rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Before we do the 21 gun salute, I want you to notice back here, we built a star out of American flags the other day to honor those men and women that passed away in the soldiers' home, both in Chelsea and in Holyoke this past year of the COVID virus. Gentlemen. No. What should be doing? Go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go, I just want to thank the Southbridge Fire Department for their honor guard today. I want to thank the Southbridge Police Department for the firing detail today. I want to thank Rich for the music. I want to thank Cable Access for coming out here, providing video footage of the past 3 days, actually, of the ceremonies and the flag placements, and all the others that are watching home today and that are out here today. And I want to thank all you veterans, and just from in memoriam of all those that served and didn't come home. God bless you. Thank you.